Today's daf we're going to be learning is Zevachim daf samach gimel. We're going to get started from the top of our daf. I just want to go back for 1 quick minute about the ramps leading up to the altar. So just to clarify, there's two on both sides of the ramp. There's one big ramp going up. Okay, in fact, I'm going to just pull up the picture for a minute. Just open the English one on my computer. Okay, fine. We're going to show a bunch of times today. We're going to show our map. So let's share screen. Now there were ramps on both sides of the altar. So if we look at this map, okay, so opening it. Okay, so we have the altar here, and there's ramps going up. Okay, let me just pull it up and zoom it in. Okay, so there's a ramp going up to the altar. That's the big ramp. Now, if we go on the right side, there's a ramp. That's one ramp. And if you see on the left side, there's two ramps. It's very hard from this picture to really see, but one goes down from the top part way, and then the other one goes back the other way part way. So it's a double-sided ramp that kind of, instead of the ramp going all the way down, okay, so there's the regular ramp that goes all the way down, but this ramp goes part way down and then part way down angled back toward the altar. That's the best way to describe it in words. So let's talk about the purpose of each of these altars. So first of all, it's interesting to note that the ramp that goes from the right side of the altar, okay, or we call it the eastern side. So that's the ramp closer to the entrance of the Azara. That ramp goes up to the sovev, that midway point, or a little bit above midway, at 6 cubits of height, where all the kohanim would then go up the ramp to go around. And that's where all the avodot that were done on the upper part of the altar were done there. The kohen would stand there and sprinkle the blood on the side. There's a bit of a debate about when the sprinkling of the blood happened for the chata, for the sin offering at the top. Was it done on the sovev or was it done from the top? But let's just leave that issue aside. If they need to go on the sovev, that midpoint, to deal with something higher up on the altar, but not from the top of the altar, they would go on the sovev, they would go up this ramp. And by the way, we talked about all the pinot, they go yamin and they go all around. And then we're going to see this later today. In general, when they go up to the top of the altar, they basically circle around in a counterclockwise way. They start going to the right, and then from there they go all the way around counterclockwise. And then they go back down the ramp on the other side. In the sovev, you can't do that, because even though there's a ramp going midway on the sovev on one side, that's the only ramp that goes up to the sovev, and therefore the only ramp that goes down from the sovev. The other ramp on the other side, that small ramp, is basically meant for going to the yesod. And you can see this very well in the picture. Because the yesod, where generally they poured the blood into the yesod, was done in these two holes. Okay? Now here the two holes are parallel to each other, but they're not really parallel. But anyway, these are two holes. They're near each other on a bit of a diagonal. I don't know why the picture shows it like this. I guess there's different opinions. But the point is that when you get down, you don't want the blood. You want the blood to remain, right, in its state and not to dry up. So you want to get to the yesod with the remainder of the blood as quickly as possible. Already, right, you slaughtered the animal, you bring it up to the ramp, right, you bring it up, and then you go put it, this is for the sin offering, you put it on the four corners, and then you want to get down as quickly as possible to get to the yesod. So instead of making you go all the way down the ramp to the bottom and then having to swing back around, they do this double ramp that goes back and forth on your way down so that you end up right near the yesod. Okay, that's the idea of that other ramp. Now the Gemara is going to talk about these ramps and what was the slope on the ramps. So Amarami Barchama Kol Kivshek Vashim Shalosh Amot Lama. All the ramps in whatever ramps there were. Okay, I don't know if there were other ramps as well, but we definitely saw these other ramps on the side of the altar. They're all 3 amot to an amma. What's the slope of them? For every 3 amot of ground you progress on that altar, on that ramp, you're getting up 1 amma of height. Okay, so 3 to 1 is the ratio of how much length you're going to cover for how much height you're going to go up. Chutz mikiv shoshel mizbeach, other than the kevesh of the altar, meaning that big one, which is going to be different. Hu shalosh amot b'mechza ve'etzba u'shlish etchba b'zachruta. Okay, that's a bit of a long term, a long complex way of saying something that's actually kind of simple. But it's how much? It's 3, I just want to check one thing, 1 second. Right, b'zachruta is ba'agudal, with your thumb. Okay, so if you're talking about fingers, it's fingers that are like your thumb. Okay, but what's the issue here? Let's just discuss. We'll get to all the nitty-gritty mathematics. Okay, it sounds complicated. It's not so complicated. If the ramp is 32 and the height you gain is 9, because remember, the mizbeach was 10, but 10 includes the kranot, okay, which come up from the top of the altar. So if you want to get to the top of the altar, you go on that ramp. It's 9. You're covering 9 cubits of height. So 32 divided by 9 comes out to 3 5/9. Okay, now, 5/9 is the same as saying, okay, 3 5/9 is like saying 3.5 plus 1/18. Okay, it's just the same mathematically. I'm not going to start telling you how you get all that, but it's pretty basic. So now, why 18ths? Why is it important to put in 18ths? Because how many fingers were in a cubit? 24 fingers to a cubit. So now, if you've taken this, what do we have to get to? We have to get to this number, how we got to 3.5 cubits, and an etzba and a shlish etzba, and 1 1/3 fingers width, okay? So it's 3.5 cubits to 1 1/3 fingers. Now what, again, 1 1/3 fingers, 24 fingers make up a cubit. So if, instead of saying 1 1/3 of a cubit, you say 1 1/3 of 24, sorry, not 1 1/3. You want 1 1/3, okay? You want to get to 1 1/3. Where do we get this 1 1/3 finger? So basically, we're going to say, because it's 3.5 plus this 1 1/3. Now, 1/18, which is the same as the 1, okay? We're going to see 1/18, we had 3 5/9. 32 divided by 9 is 3 5/9. We said that what's more than half, we basically had 5/9, which is 1/18 more. So now, if we do that, 1/18 of 24, okay, is how much? Is 4/3. What's 4/3? 1 1/3. So that's how we get to that number. In other words, it wasn't that they said, oh, let's do the slope this height. They just knew that 32 to 9. Okay, so that basically gets us to the number we were looking for. Okay, menachot hayu nikmitzot. If you didn't get all that calculation, don't worry about it. It's just it's just the background for what that was. It's just saying how they got to that number. Okay, now we move to the menachot. Menachot hayu nikmitzot bechol makom ba'azara. Let's just go back for one quick minute. We did Ezu Makoman Shel Zevachim. That was the whole last chapter, and we have where do we do all the slaughtering of all the animals, okay? That's Zevachim. Now, we started the 6th chapter, and we kind of left that for a minute. We went to a Mishnah which talked about, can you do slaughtering on the top of the altar, right? That was the whole question. And they basically finished the the slaughtering, the issue of slaughtering. So where do we slaughter? Let me get to that. Now, this is really a continuation of Ezu Mukaman Shel, but not of Zevachim. We're now going to do Ezu Mukaman of Menachot, okay, and then of Ofot, of birds, okay, which also aren't slaughtered. Okay, so these are not Ezu Mukaman Shel Zevachim, it's Ezu Mukaman of other offerings. And now we're going to have Mishnayot that are very, very parallel to the previous Mishnayot that we saw in the previous chapter. Menachot hayu nikmitzot bechol makom ba'azara v'nechalot lifnim min haklaim lizichrei kuna b'chol machal liyom v'layla al chatzot. So now we get to the meal offerings. And what do we know about the meal offerings? You do the kmitza. Okay, remember what you do. You take a dough, you put it in a sanctified vessel. Then you take a kmitza. You basically take a handful, right? 3 fingers worth is the handful. It's not a full handful. Kohen does that, puts his hand in, takes the handful. We're going to learn that there was one thing that had to happen before. After you put the dough in a kli sharet, you bring it to the altar. That's called hagasha. It's an action that you do. You bring it to the altar. Then you bring it to the altar. You do the kmitza. Then after he takes the kmitza out, then he burns that on the altar. And then the remainder of the kohanim can eat it. And that's exactly what it's telling us here. The remainder, male kohanim can eat it. Right? That's l'zichrei kuna lifnim min haklaim. It has to be within the Azara eaten. And any way you want to prepare it. And Yom V'layla Chatzot, you have to eat it by that night until midnight. So the only thing I kind of skipped here is the beginning, which is the mincha. You could do the kmitza anywhere in the Azara. Okay? Just had to be somewhere in the Azara. So the first thing we're going to do right now, we're only going to do 2 things here, and this is the only one that really has to do with the Mishnah. The other is going to be kind of having to do with this statement of Rabbi Elazar. We're going to have a statement of Rabbi Elazar, and then we're going to have a statement of Rabbi Yochanan that somewhat relates to this. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Now remember, the Azara, okay, if we go back to our map, The Azara includes, okay, I'll remind you, these maps are from the Mechon HaMikdash, okay, and if you want, I put up on the, actually, that didn't work, I wanted to share it, yeah, okay, so the maps you can order from the Mechon HaMikdash, either a digital copy that you can then print on your own, or you can order also, they can mail it to you, which, as you all know from the mail, it takes a while, but you can do that because we still have a while, we're going to need these. Highly recommended. They've laminated, not laminated. Anyway, it's a very, very useful tool. So for sure, for Seder Kodshim in general. Okay, and I will share screen and I will allow you to see them in the video. Okay, so now we have the mincha. Okay, it's kmitza b'chol Azara. Okay, here's the Azara, the whole yellow part here. Now in the Azara, there's this building. The building included the front hall, the sanctuary, right, the ulam, the Heichal, and all that area. Is that considered the Azara? Can you do the kmitza there? Because theoretically it's within the Azara. On the other hand, it's holier place. So can you do it? So Rabbi Elazar says yes. Now his language, just to note, is what we call a b'diavad language. It's not ideal. Okay? If you do it, right? So you can do it, but it's not ideal. Okay? It's kshera. So if you did it in the Heichal, that's how it's worded, mincha, that the kmitza was taken in the Heichal, is kshera, right? Obviously, you have to then take it out of there and burn it on the altar because it has to be burned and no one's burning it inside. Now, how does he prove that you can do this? He says, shekem matzinu b'siluk b'zichim. Okay, what is siluk b'zichim? Well, here's the showbread table inside the Heichal. With the showbread, the lechem apanim, there were 2 b'zichei levona. These 2, we've talked about them, bowls with frankincense. And at the end of each week on Shabbat, when they replaced the breads with new breads, they would take the bizichei levona out, these bowls with frankincense. They would take them out of the Heichal and offer them up on the altar. Just like, that's what they're saying. If we took the kmitza and we did the kmitza inside the sanctuary and then took it outside to burn, it would be the same as the bizichei levona, where you're taking something out of the sanctuary and then you're burning it on the altar. And there's more to it than that. Both of them have a pasuk, a verse by them that talks about, it uses the word azkarata. That these are both considered an azkarata, like a bringing up the memory of somebody. And because of that, we're assuming that the laws can be the same, and that's where he proves that it can be done. But mativ Rabbi Yirmia. Rabbi Yirmia is now going to come with a difficulty on this. V'kamatz misham. Now the pasuk about the kmitza says, okay, you have to read it. V'hevi'al b'nei Aaron kohanim. So you bring, like let's say I want to bring a meal offering. I bring it to the kohen. V'kamatz misham. And when I bring it to the kohen, it sounds like the literal reading of that pasuk. He does the kmitza right there, where I bring it to him. So now they say, the drasha is v'kamatz misham. So Rabbi Yirmia brings a Tanaitic source that says, mimakom sheraglei hazar omdot. Where do you do the kmitza? In the place where the zar, the non-kohen, like me, who goes and brings a mincha offering, where I can stand. Now, I can't stand in the Heichal, so therefore it sounds like it can't be done in the Heichal, because it has to be done where a regular person can stand. Now we're just going to read a different interpretation of what the kamatz misham means, but this is irrelevant to our purposes. It just happens to come in the braita. Ben betera omer, minayin she'im kamatz b'smol she'achzir v'yikmotz b'yamim. What if accidentally the kohen did a kmitza with his left hand? So he just redoes it with his right hand and then it's good. It's not like it ruins it. It just means it wasn't good what he did with the left hand, but he redoes it with the right. We've seen this before. Talmud lama, misham. What does it mean, misham? Misham means mimakom shekamatz kval, from the place where he already took a kmitza from. In other words, what they're saying, misham, from a place where it was already done. That's an interesting interpretation of from there. But from there, meaning from even where it was already done, meaning done incorrectly, he can fix it. Okay, that's a side point. But the problem is, the v'kamatz misham, the way we're understanding it now, she'im kamatz, mimakom sheraglei hazar omdot, it sounds like it's limiting. It can only be done in a place where a regular person can stand, and obviously not in the Heichal, where regular people can't go. Only kohanim can go there. So, ikad amre, some people say, hu motiv alav hu mefarikla. He asked the question, Rabbi Yirmia, and he answered it. Ikad amre, some people say, amre le Rabbi Yaakov, le Rabbi Yirmia bar Tachlifa. The Rabbi Yaakov said to Rabbi Yirmia, son of Tachlifa, he was the one who answered the question. So, either which way, somebody answers the question, and here he says, Azara, I'm going to explain to you. Okay, that sounds like, that version seems to be Rabbi Yaakov saying, I will explain to you, Rabbi Yirmia. Lo nitzracha elalach. Okay, but basically the gist of this is going to be, It's not limiting, it's expanding. That drasha, v'kamas misham mimakom sheraglei Azara umdot, doesn't mean only where Azar can stand. What it means is, lo nitzcha ela lachshir kol Azara kula. It's to tell you can do this anywhere in the Azara, even in a place where Azar can go, meaning it's anywhere, not just in a particular location. Now, the whole question is, why would you think it would have to be done in a particular location, right? What would be the havamina? And for this, we're going to have two different explanations. The first one we're going to reject, okay? But at first they think, because in order to say that this is an expansion, you have to say, why would you have thought we would limit it? So the first explanation is, you would have thought, ho'il va'ola koche koche, umincha koche koche, right? Because an ola is high-level sanctity, and a mincha is also high-level sanctity. That's why it can only be eaten by male kohanim. Ma ola, well now we know. What does the ola require? Remember, tu'unat safon, the slaughtering has to be in the north. You might remember, we discussed this a long time ago, but when we compare the avodot of an animal to a meal offering, the slaughtering is compared to the kmitza of the mincha, because both are basically separating the part that we're going to offer on the altar. In the animal, it's just, you're slaughtering the animal in order to take the blood. In the kmitza, you're basically separating. It's kind of similar. You're separating one part from another and taking out the kmitza so that you can offer it on the altar. So, according to this, you're going to have you might have thought, so just like the slaughtering has to happen in the north, also the meal offering has to happen in the north. So the Gemara says, no, you wouldn't have thought that. Why wouldn't you have thought that? What a crazy comparison. Ola is way different than mincha, because ola is much more severe, stringent than mincha. Ma ola shken kalil. The ola is completely offered. This, you're offering a little part of the whole mincha offering. The rest gets to get eaten. So of course you wouldn't think to learn, just because ola is limited to tzafon, you wouldn't have said mincha is limited to tzafon. So they say, okay, option 2, michatat. Maybe we would have learned it from a sin offering, which isn't completely offered. But no, because malachatat came a chaperda, chai bekritot. We've said this many times. Chatat is severe, is stringent, because it atones for high-level sins, ones that you're chayav kari for. Mincha doesn't do that. Okay, so no reason to have thought that you would learn tzafon from the mincha, from the chatat. Now again, this is all an attempt to say, let's just remember, why would we have even thought, right? We need this drasha. Basically what we're saying is to say it expand. Expand why? Well, you might have thought it's only in the north, but right now we're not really succeeding, because no real reason you would have thought it's only in the north. If you learned it from ola, ola's got its own stringent laws. If you learned it from chatat, chatat has its own strict laws. Okay, how about mi asham? She doesn't have the chai bekritut, it's not completely burned. But mala asham shkemine damim. But asham has blood, right? Blood is obviously a higher level of korban than one that's a meal offering. So now we basically strike out, because we're not going to get it from there, we're not going to get it from there, we're not going to get it from there. Now they try. What about mikulu? What about all three together? But that obviously isn't going to work either. Because malakulu shkemine damim. All three of those, ola, chatat, asham, are all sacrifices with blood. And this is a meal offering, which we know is a lower level, right? How do we know? Well, for example, the Olevi Yored, if you remember, there's either bring animals, which is the best. If you're not rich enough, you bring birds. If not, you go down to the meal offering. It's obviously much lighter than all the rest. So no reason to think that you could have done it in the north. So that kind of falls aside. But now they're going to come up with a different reason. Still, they're going to say, this drasha of, again, mimakom sheraglei Azara umdot is not to say it has to be done there and not in the Heichal. That was what we tried to say. But no, we're going to say that drasha is saying even where the zar is. It's an expansive braita, but not for the reason we thought before, that you might have thought it was north. Second reason, there's this action you're supposed to do, which is you bring it to the altar. So since there's this action of bringing it to the altar, you might have thought, and you're supposed to then take out the cubits, mahagasha bekeren maravit romit, af kmitza bekeren tromit maravit. You might have thought that just like the hagasha, and this we don't know where we get this from, but we're going to see this later today, it has to be brought to the altar. Now, where is it brought to the altar? I just want to check one thing. Okay. Yeah. So basically, I just wanted to point out, these two psukim come from different places, okay? They're not one after the other. It looks like they're one after the other, but if you look, Higishol HaMizbeach, the halacha of Higisho, is in Vayikra chapter 2. And Hirimi Menu B'Kumtso is in Vayikra chapter 6. They both happen to be verse number 8, but in two totally different chapters. But what they're trying to say here is, because Hagasha, bring it to the altar, actually has to happen before the kmitza is done. So you might have thought, and then what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to be merim from it, and from it is what you brought to the altar. So you might have thought that since, again, let's just take our picture because visualizing it is much better, that since this has to happen, okay, let's just look, on the Hagasha has to be, and we're going to see later, you walk over, you take that kli sharet, and you walk it over to the southwest corner, okay? Later we're going to see why southwest. Okay, let's just remember, southwest is the west side is where the Heichal is, okay? So southwest is the same place, I'm just going to point out, because we're here on the map, where the Yesod is with the two holes in the Yesod. And it's the same place where we have those two shitin, that southwest corner. Today we're going to talk about all the things that are done in that southwest corner. There's 6 things, 3 at the bottom, 3 at the top. That will be our next Mishnah. But the point being that since Hagasha has to happen specifically here, you might have thought maybe the kmitza has to happen there, which actually seems very logical, because if you're bringing it there and then you're doing the kmitza, it would be kind of obvious you would bring it there and then do the kmitza there. Well, the point being you don't really have to. The kmitza can really be done anywhere. That action of the kohen taking out that part of the kmitza could be done anywhere in the Azara, and that's what it's telling you. Mimakom sheraglei Azara umdot, okay? Wherever Azara, right? You know, it's even, again, this isn't specifically where, that's what we thought it meant originally, but even where Azara can go, meaning anywhere in the Azara, like even it could be in the beginning part, it doesn't have to be specifically there. Anyway, therefore it means you could do it anywhere in the Azara, and that would include the Heichal as well. Okay? And then that doesn't contradict Rabbi Elazar. So we're good now. So again, let's just keep reading. This is just what I explained already. Ma Hagasha b'kerem maravit romit, just like the Hagasha is in that southwest corner. Av kmitza b'kerem maravit romit. So you might have thought the kmitza is also there. Kamash malan. And that's what that drasha is telling you. So what we did so far is we brought this drasha, and we said, we thought the drasha went against what Rabbi Elazar said, that if you did the kmitza in the Heichal, it's good. Just like the bezichei levona come out. Okay, it's obviously different because the bezichei levona, that's the way they're supposed to be done. The kmitza, let's be clear, it's not the way it's supposed to be done. It really is supposed to be done on that southwest corner. But if it's done somewhere else, it's fine. Anywhere in the Azara, including in the Heichal. Now I'm Rabbi Yochanan. If already we were talking about things that could be done in the Heichal, comes Rabbi Yochanan and says, Shlamim sheshachatam beheichal ksherim, shene'emar. What if you slaughter the shlamim inside? Now remember, shlamim can be done anywhere in the Azara, slaughter. What if you slaughtered them inside the Heichal? Okay, this theoretically really belonged in the previous chapter, but once they were talking about in the Mincha, so Rabbi Yochanan brings it up also by the shlamim. So I want to remind you, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yochanan are both Amoraim in Israel. Rabbi Elazar was the student of Rabbi Yochanan. So this basically is an Eretz Israel sugya. First Rabbi Elazar telling us about the Mincha can be done in the Heichal, and now we hear Rabbi Yochanan said the shlamim can be slaughtered in the Heichal. Shenemar, ushchato petach ol moed. So here's his proof. It's going to be not really from a pasuk, but logic coming out of this pasuk. You slaughter it at the opening of the Ol Moed. Remember, Ol Moed in the Mishkan is parallel to the Azara, the Heichal in the temple. Now, it says slaughter it in the opening of Ol Moed. Comes the Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo Yehei Tafel Chamur Min Ha'ikal. What's the real important place? The Ol Moed. Now here it's saying you can slaughter it outside Ol Moed, but if you can slaughter it outside Ol Moed, obviously you could slaughter it inside Ol Moed. That's the logic. Okay, that if something is allowed to can be done in a place that's not actually in the Ol Moed but outside, then the assumption is, of course, since it's an important sacrificial rite, it can obviously be done in the more important place, which is actually the Ol Moed, which is in the sanctuary. Now, again, we're going to have a difficulty, and you can imagine this isn't necessarily going to always be true. Meitive, right? This should be Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer, okay, not Rabbi Yochanan. Minayin shemikifu goyim is kol Azara. Let's say there's non-Jews holding up guns to you. You're in the Azara. In the Azara, they're basically going to shoot at you. Shakohanim nechnesim l'sham ve'ochlim sham kodshe kodshim. The kohanim can go into the Heichal and eat there the kodshe kodshim. How do we know this? Okay, if they have no choice, they get to do that because it says Talmud Lamal, Bit Kodesh HaKodeshim Tochlenu. Now this is talking about the matno kuna that the kohanim get in Bamidbar chapter 18, and it says you can eat it in the Kodesh Kodeshim. Now it doesn't really mean the Kodesh Kodeshim; it means the sanctuary. Va'amai nema b'chatzar ol moed yochlua. Now why? Right? It says b'chatzar ol moed yochlua, and okay, now what you have to understand here that's very important is what they're trying to say here, and it's a little tricky, but they're saying if you have no choice, you can eat in the Heichal. How do we know that? From this verse, which means that you wouldn't have gotten it if it weren't for the verse. Okay? It means we need a verse to tell you that. That's why this gets a little confusing, because in the end you can eat there. But the point is that without that pasuk, you would never have known that. You would have thought you can't eat there. Now, why? According to what we just said, Amai. Nema b'chatzar ol moed yochlua. The pasuk says somewhere else, eat it in the courtyard of ol moed, which means the Azara. V'lo yehei tafel chamor min ha'ikar. Now, if you can eat it outside, and that's the less important place, then well, obviously you can eat it in the more sanctified place, which is the ol moed. So why do you need a pasuk to tell you that? It's just logic. So basically, that logic obviously doesn't hold, and that's the question of Rabbi Yochanan. Your logic of tafel min ha'ikar, and you can see why, because right, just because it's more holy doesn't necessarily mean you can eat there. It doesn't necessarily mean you can slaughter there, because maybe you're not allowed to eat. Maybe you're not allowed to slaughter there because it's more holy. So the Gemara says that's not a good comparison, because eating and slaughtering are not the same thing at all, right? Hachi hashta. What, you're comparing eating to slaughtering? Hatam avoda. Da adam oved b'mkom rabo. Where do you do a sacrificial rite? In front of your God, right? We do it in front of God. Now, where are you more in front of God? In the Heichal. So of course you could do the sacrificial rite in the Heichal. And therefore, Amrina lo yeh tafel chamor min ha'ikar. That principle applies there. But achila, but eating, de'en adam ochel b'mkom rabo. It's not actually appropriate to eat in front of your God, right? That's not exactly the most appropriate thing. So therefore, in that case, lo yeh tafel chamor min ha'ikar lo amrinan. This, you should, right? You shouldn't say that the less important place is any more capable than the more important place. No, we don't say that. That principle is not applicable here, okay? Because that's eating. That's something you're not supposed to do in front of your master. So basically, we resolve the difficulty against Rabbi Yochanan, we resolve the difficulty against Rabbi Elazar, and what we come out with from this whole section is, number one, a mincha that you did the kmitza in the Heichal is fine, and shlamim that you slaughtered in the Heichal is fine. Okay, even though, again, in both cases, it's not the ideal thing to do, but if you did it, the sacrifice is not disqualified. Okay, new Mishnah. Now we're moving to the chatat ha'of. Okay, so like I said, we did all the slaughtering of the animals, then we did the mincha, and now we're doing the birds. I don't know why it's in that order. I would have thought birds come before mincha, kind of like the korban levi yored in terms of significance, but that's how they do it. Chatat ha'of haitana aset al keren dromit maravit. Another thing that they would do in this corner is the chatat ha'of. Now I want to remind you, the sin offering with the animal is done at the top of the altar. Remember, because it goes on the kranot mizbeach, on the 4 kranot. So you do that at the top of the altar. There's actually a debate about whether the kohen would stand on the sovev. I saw this over Shabbat, that whether, we talked before, the kohen would stand on the sovev to do the 4 corners. Some people think he actually goes to the top of the mizbeach. Okay, so there's a debate about whether it's done from the sovev or from the top, but either which way it's done at the top. It's the only animal sacrifice that's done at the top. All the others, the blood is sprinkled from the bottom. In the bird offerings, it's the opposite. The ola is done at the top, and the sin offering is done at the bottom. So that's how you remember it, because it's flipped. If you remember that the chatat's done at the top, because that's the kohen takes with his finger, puts it on the 4 corners, that's easy to remember. And then in the bird, it's flipped. So the ola goes at the top, the chatat goes at the bottom. So we're starting now with the chatat, which is done at the bottom. And it was done on that southwest corner, the one we talked about before. It's a bit of a strange line. We're going to talk about this later. It's actually permitted to do everywhere, but this was its place. Okay? Now, what does it mean it was done there? So there's malika. Okay, that's why it's not called zevach, because it's not slaughtered. We do a different action, which is malika. The kohen takes his finger, right, his thumb, and puts it on the back of the neck of the bird and kind of cuts breaks the simanim there. He can even break just one siman, it's fine. Anyway, we'll get to the details, the gory details coming up. Not today. That's the slaughtering in the temple is called malika of the birds. And it's kshera b'chomaka. Okay, so we do malika, and then we do the sprinkling of the blood. Okay, this has sprinkling associated with it. And then there's mitzui, which is the kohen squeezes the rest of the blood, the remainder, and puts it on the wall, like directly, squeezing the animal right up against the wall. So now, this was done everywhere, except that this was its place. That's a little bit of a confusing line. We'll get back to that in the Gemara. And now the Mishnah goes off on a tangent and tells us, oh, by the way, we're talking about southwest corner. I'm going to tell you a few things that happened there. Okay, there were three things that are done there at the top and three things at the bottom. Okay, we're going to start with the bottom ones, and I'm going to show you the picture again because I think it's just helpful to see. You'll understand why some of these things were done there. Chatat ha'of, so the chatat ha'of goes there. Hagashot, the hagashat mincha that we said you have to bring the mincha to the altar, that's right there. And the shayarei adam, and obviously the blood is spilled there because that's where those two holes were that we talked about, where the remainder of the blood is spilled into the two holes in the yesod. Not to be confused with the two holes above that we talked about in yesterday's daf, the shitin, okay, which they were yesterday or Friday, I can't remember now, but we just talked about them, the shitin. So now they say the milamalan up top, okay, and that's where the shitin were, these holes that went down into this pit. Nisuchayayin vehamayim, okay, so those libations of the wine and the water libations were poured into these holes, which are at the top, and they happen to be in that same corner. And olata of, and the ola of the bird, okay, which actually isn't really done here, but we're going to see in a second. Kishihi rabba b'mizrach. Okay, the bird offering of the ola that we do up at the top is done actually on the southeast side. But if you remember, that was that whole weird case we had where how could you do it on the southeast side if there's no base there? Because remember, the blood always has to be put where there's a base, and so it drips down into the base. And then they said, Rashi had to explain that they put some sort of thing that jutted out. Remember, they said the avir, the airspace was binyamin still, so they could do it there, and then the blood would drop onto this, something that was jutting out from the altar, and that would catch the blood. So that's how we know the Olat Hof is done on the southeast side. But when there's no room there, like if there's too much traffic over there, then they would do it on the southwest side. Now, kol ha'olin lemizbech, olin derech yamin, umekifim v'yordim derech smol. Okay, so you go up the altar. Every time you go up on the right side of the altar. That's really the east side of the altar. So you're walking up the altar on the east side, and then you turn right. Okay, so if you're going on the sovev, again, you go up that small ramp on the side, and you go up to the right, and you start working your way around the altar. Now, with the sovev, we said it was tricky because you can't come down the other side. You have to somehow come back. But if you go up the regular ramp, then you're going to go to the right, and then you're going to continue counterclockwise, walking all around until you get to the other side, v'yordim derech smol, and then you go down the left side of the ramp on your way down, which is going to be the western side. Okay, that's the way you would normally go. But here's an exception, because these three things are done in this southwest corner. Now, if you go up the ramp, you're going to have to go all the way around, and we're going to see later in the Gemara, they're going to tell you that we don't want you to go all the way around with these things. Okay, so let's just go for a minute. Chutz min ha'oleh l'shlosha elu, hayu olim v'yordim al ha'akev. Okay, what does that mean on your heel? Well, what you would do is you would go up on the left side. You get right to the corner that you want, because that's where you're going to be if you go on the left side, because that's the western side. You're going to do your job. You're going to be facing the altar while you do it, right? Like you're going up, you keep facing straight, and then you're going to turn on your heel and go right back down. Okay, so you're going to do a switch, turn around, and go right back down. Now, the reason is because you're either holding a bird, or you're holding the wine or the water. And we're going to talk about later, the Gemara is going to say why they were worried, because there's a lot of fire going on up here, and we're worried somehow that these things will get ruined as you're going to walk around, and we want you to just get there quickly and not go around where there's like a lot of heat going on and smoke and all that. So we'll talk about that later. But right now, let's just take it as that's what you do. So now the Gemara wants to know, minahane milei. Okay, so Rashi helps us out. What are we asking about? Because we did say a whole bunch of things in that Mishnah. So Rashi says, how do we know that the chatat ha'of is done on that corner? Okay, where do we get it from? So Amar Rabbi Yoshua Amar Kra. It's going to bring a pasuk. This is the pasuk by the Korban Olevi Yored, which is, again, there's certain sins that if you do it, you bring a chatat, but you can't afford the animal, you bring two birds. One is chatat, one is ola. Okay, that's one of these olata, the chatat ha'of, that's this, okay? And we have the mincha. You bring a mincha offering. If not, it's called a minchat chotei. It's a mincha of a sinner because you sinned and you bring this offering. Now, it says there, because it's a sin offering, we want to keep it very basic. We don't want it to be like a nice, beautiful thing. So, lo yasim ala shemen v'lo yiten ala levona. You don't put shemen, you don't put levona, ki chatati, because it's a sin offering. Okay, like a sin offering shouldn't be this beautiful offering with frankincense and nice smell and with oil. It should be very basic, bread and water, right? Like flour and water. So now, but they say chatati. They kind of call this mincha chatat. Comes the braita and says, or Rabbi Yeshua says, chatat kruya mincha, mincha kruya chatat. We're going to make this comparison from mincha to sin offering and sin offering to mincha. How so? Ma chatat tu'unat tzafon, af mincha tu'unat tzafon. Just like the chatat needs to be slaughtered in the north, also the mincha needs to be done in the north. Okay, this makes no sense. We spent the beginning of Amud Aleph talking about how it doesn't need to be done in the north. So Rashi says is obviously a Girsa problem here. And Rashi changes this completely to say, no, we learned something completely different. There's actually a debate among the commentaries what really this should say. But we'll go with Rashi, especially this isn't even our issue because this isn't the part we're looking for. But Rashi says what it means is, remember the beginning of our Masechet, that a chatat that's done shalol lishma is disqualified, and that's unique for chatat and a Pesach bismana. So also the mincha that's done shalol lishma is learned from a chatat and is also disqualified. Okay, that's what Rashi learns from here, but like I said, there's different opinions. But this isn't our main thing that we want to learn. Here's the big one. Ma chatat ma mincha bekerem aravit romit, af chatat bekerem aravit romit. Just like the mincha, and we saw this on the previous Amud today, the mincha, the hagasha, where do you bring it to the altar? Now, we didn't learn where. We're going to get that right now, or in a minute. But just like the mincha has to be brought to that southwest corner, also the chatat has to be done in the southwest corner. That's what we learned from it. And obviously, we're talking here about chatat ha'of, not the chatat sin offering, regular one. That's done at the top of the altar and on all the four corners. This is done specifically on the southwest corner, the chatat ha'of. So now the Gemara is going to ask the obvious question. Umincha gufa menalan. Where do we learn that the mincha is done on the southwest corner? For this, again, you need your maps. Because what happens here? Well, Ditanya, Lifnei Hashem. Now it says, it's supposed to be, okay, I'll read you the whole pasuk. V'zot Torah mincha. This is the rules for the mincha. Hakrev otah b'nei Aharon lifnei Hashem et p'nam el p'nam mizbech. So they should bring it before God to the face of the altar. Now, what does it mean to the face of the altar? Well, you're facing the altar when you're going up the ramp. That's when you're facing it. So, Lifnei Hashem, it says, Yachol b'ma'arav. You would have thought on the west side, because remember, we've learned that a lot. When it says before God, it means do it on the side that's right where you walk out of the ulam. And actually opposite the exit of either the Heichal or the ulam. That was all those pictures we had, right? Which exit had to be opposite, but right, you could say one or the other. Talmud Lomar, but it says, El Pnei Mizbeach. Now, El Pnei Mizbeach is south. So, El Pnei Mizbeach Yachol b'daron. So I said, fine. If we take El Pnei Mizbeach literally, it should be on the south. Talmud Lomar, Lifnei Hashem. But then it says it has to be before God, and south isn't before God. HaKetzad, so how do you accomplish both? Migisha b'kerem maravit romit keneged chudash al kerem v'dayon. What do? You put it on the southwest corner, on the corner specifically, right? We saw that before. It's right where the two sides hit. And then you're both in the north and in the south, and you can accomplish both things at once. Now, we're going to get later to saying it depends really where the Mizbeach is situated, but let's wait for that for another 2 minutes. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Yachol yigishanu l'ma'arav ashel keren o lidrom ashel keren. He suggests maybe, since it says two things, El Pnei Mizbeach and Lifnei Hashem, maybe it means either do it on the west side or do it on the south side, right? You could do it here anywhere, or you could do it there anywhere. In other words, maybe it's just trying to give you two different possibilities. So to answer this question, he says, Amarta, if you have two psukim, in this case it's two parts of the same pasuk, but it all means the same thing. And with your explanation, you could have an explanation that basically allows both psukim, right, to make sense. Or another one says this one's right, but that one's not. You're basically establishing one as correct, but while knocking out the other. But if you have those two possibilities, so you're obviously going to leave aside the one that only fulfills one of them and not the other, and you'd rather go, if you have a way to do both, better off to get both in. So therefore, here's our example. If you say that Pnei Hashem is b'ma'arav on the west side, you're not fulfilling El Pnei HaMizbeach. You're not standing opposite the altar. And if you do, Ukshata Omer El Pnei HaMizbeach b'darom, Kiyamta Lifnei Hashem. So Kiyamta, but Lifnei Hashem b'darom echan Kiyamta. But how did you, if you stand before God on the south, opposite the altar on the south, you're not fulfilling before God. So, therefore, you're going to basically do it as both. Okay, you're going to do it on the corner, and that allows you to get in both. Okay, so we'd rather go by that interpretation. Amar Rav Ashi. Now, Rav Ashi says, Kasavar Haitana, Kula Mizbeach B'tzafon Kai. Now, he says, because look at our picture. If you take our picture, again, we said, if you're not looking at the picture, the map that we're using right now shows the Mizbeach is mostly in the south and a little bit juts into the north. Now, according to that, remember, the exit to the sanctuary and the ulam is either 10 cubits wide or 20 cubits wide, and it's opposite, right? It's centered in the room. So if the Mizbeach is only a little bit in the north, then when you get out of the ulam and the sanctuary, you're going to be on the northern part of the altar, and the southern tip, which is the southwest tip, is definitely not Lifnei Hashem. It's not opposite the exit. The only way, even if it was half-half, you still, if you're on that southwest corner, right, remember, it's 6 or 11 cubits. It's 6 cubits off from the exit of the ulam and 11 cubits off from the exit of the sanctuary. So you're not going to be Lifnei Hashem either. So the only way for this to make sense, that you can actually accomplish both, is if the whole Mizbeach was moved all the way, right, which there was an opinion that way, completely in the north. Because then the south tip is exactly, right, if you move this all the way down, which we unfortunately can't do right now, but you're basically going to walk out of the sanctuary. If you centered in the room, that southwest corner is mamash in the center of the room. So then you're going to hit that corner where you're basically fulfilling both Lifnei Hashem and also Pnei HaMizbeach, which is on the south side. So that's why that's the corner that it is. And again, this was all learned about the mincha. And from that pasuk about the mincha, which mentioned chatat, we're going to learn about there also to the chatat ha'of. Okay, and that's done again, both of those at the bottom. Okay, now we're going to finish up and understand this last line. This line of the Mishnah, but this was its place. So that's a bit of a weird line. My kamar, what does this mean? Amar Rav Ashi hachi kamar. What it means to say is, you could do the malika anywhere. But the sprinkling had to take place here. Okay, that's how we understand the Mishnah. Not like a simple reading. Simple reading actually sounds like you could do it anywhere, but ideally do it here. But that's not what they said, really. They said, B'chol makom was kshera, but this was the place where you can sprinkle it. Okay, meaning the malika could be done anywhere, just like the slaughtering, but specifically the sprinkling had to be done on that corner. Tanina lahad detana rabbanan. Now we're going to bring a braita that supports that reading. Milaka b'chol makom b'mizbeach kshera. If you did malika anywhere in the altar, it's kshera. Hiza dama b'chol makom kshera. If you sprinkle the blood anywhere, it's fine. Okay, this doesn't sound right yet, so just wait, because we were looking for the sprinkling specifically has to happen in a specific place. Hiza v'lo mitza kshera. If you just did the sprinkling, you didn't do the mitzoi, the squeezing. Remember, the squeezing is the remainder. It's kshera because the remainder is not essential. We've learned that many times. What is essential? Well, the blood has to be on the bottom half of the altar. So now they say, my kamar, wait, this doesn't make sense. It just said before that the haza'ah could be done anywhere. And now it says it has to be on the bottom half of the altar. So it means it can't be done anywhere. So this doesn't make any sense, to which they have to reread this braita. And now it's going to fit in with how we read our Mishnah. Because, hachi kamar, or how Rav Ashi read the Mishnah. Milaka b'chol makom b'mizbeach. Kshera. If you do the malika anywhere on the altar, it's fine. Mitza dama b'chol makom b'mizbeach kshera. If you do the mitzvah hadam, the squeezing of the blood off, of the remainder, you could do it anywhere. Why is that? I'm just going to go on a little bit more because we're mid-sentence. Shemiza v'lo mitza kshera. Because if you do hazah and you don't do mitzvah, it's fine. So therefore, wherever you do mitzvah is obviously going to be fine, because it's even fine if you don't do mitzvah at all. Ubilva, but what is essential? Now notice, he took out here the hazah b'chol makom is kshera. And now he says, the The dam, though, the haza'ata dam, the sprinkling of the blood must be done on the bottom part. And that's basically how he reads the Mishnah. So the Mishnah reads like this, right? Chatara of was in the Karen Dromit Maravi, and b'chol makom hayta kshera, meaning anywhere in the altar you could do it, but not the haza'ah. Ela zeh hayta mekoma, specifically it had to be done on the bottom for the blood of the chatara of, and that had to be done specifically. Also, it seems like, although I have to check it, also perhaps had to be done on that southwest corner, but I'm not sure if that is essential or not. I'll look at that for next time. And with that, we finish today's daf. So, let's just review. We started with the ramps and the slope in the ramps and the height of the slopes. From there, we got to the mincha and where it could be done. We said it could be done anywhere in the Azara. Came Rabbi Elazar and said, even in the Heichal. And then Rabbi Yochanan said, even the shlamim could be done in the Heichal. From there, we had difficulties in each of them, but resolved them. Then we went to the chatara of is done in that southwest corner, and then we said 3 things are done in the southwest corner in the top, and 3 things are done in the southwest corner at the bottom. And then we got to where do we get it from? There has to be in the southwest corner, and that's one from the mincha. Where do we get the mincha from? And that was basically our daf. We finished up with this line that was very hard to understand, but this was its place. How do we resolve that? Well, this anywhere you could do the malika, but the haza'ah, the sprinkling has to be done specifically there. Also, the mitzvah could be done anywhere, and that the mitzvah doesn't even have to be done at all. Finish from there, and I will send out today on the WhatsApp groups also the link if you want to purchase either the digital copy or the hard copy of the maps. We'll send it out today, and every time that I share it in class, it's always going to be in the details of the YouTube, so you can always find it there if you're looking. I'm wishing everyone a good day and a good week. Shavua tov.